Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the beautiful city of Melbourne. My name is Doctor Anthony Hadj. I'm a GP based here in Melbourne, and it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon to be speaking to you and debunking some of the myths that are going on regarding nutrition and diet. We have a significant problem in our society at the moment with people suffering from food poisoning. Everyone that passes this street at one time or another would have suffered from food poisoning, but I'm not talking about the food poisoning that we see with infection. I'm not talking about the food poisoning that we see from overseas. We are slowly being food poisoned by the Western diet, the diet that has an enormous amount of saturated fat, oils, salt, and processed foods, particularly animal products. These are the foods which are causing us so much dilemma. My patient population that I see every day, around about 70% of those patients will be seeing me for food poisoning, for disease management, the diseases that are being caused by the food that they are eating. And those foods really have only one thing in common. They are all based around animals. The key thing to understand is to know why animal foods are so bad for us. If we, for a second, put aside the ethical arguments, if we put that to aside, why are the health arguments so important? Animal products are not designed for us. From an evolutionary perspective, we were not designed to actually consume animal-based protein. We have enough enzymes in our body to break down starch. Now, starch is carbohydrate. Corn, potatoes, pumpkin, even the starch that is in legumes. Our enzymes are designed preferentially to break down starch. When you look at some of the carnivorous creatures such as the cats, they have canines, but they also have enzymes that are designed to break down protein. We aren't constructed like that in our DNA. As part of the evolutionary process of the great apes, all great apes have a preference for starch and fruits. When we look at the actual content of the animal products, animal protein is one of the most harmful substances, and it's one of the most toxic substances to ourselves. The rationale behind all this is that the protein that comes with animal protein is preferentially based around sulfur proteins. Now, every time you have, for example, starch, your body recognizes it as an energy source and it wants to store it, but it can't do this with protein. So protein must be broken down and recycled. Now, the only way that can happen is by the liver and the kidneys. And in fact, if you have a relative or a friend who has either liver disease or kidney disease, they will be told by their doctors to have a very, very low protein diet. The liver and the kidney can't cope when they are overwhelmed with protein. And one of the worst ways to overwhelm the liver and the kidneys is by feeding it the animal proteins, because we are not good at breaking down sulfur-based proteins. We can do a little bit, which is in plant-based foods, but when you have an overwhelming hit to the body from animal-based foods, we can't cope. Animal foods also induce inflammation. Inflammatory disease is at the cornerstone of all chronic health conditions that I see as a GP. Heart disease, hypertension, obesity, type 2 diabetes, arthritis. All these conditions are based around a battle that's going on in the body where there is a breakdown and there's inflammatory processes that are driving these diseases. Now, as a doctor, I can give you medication that will lower that hypertension, that high blood pressure. It'll lower that cholesterol. But the war is never ever going to be over. The inflammatory process is still trying to raise that pressure. It's still trying to raise that cholesterol. And as we try and fight the body, we will not win. Which is why, every so often, I've got to increase the dose. Every 6 months, increase the dose again. Inflammation drives these conditions. It's incredibly sad that some 100 years ago, the hurdles to living a sustainable, healthy, happy life were trauma, war, famine and disease. We don't have that anymore. We are here in the city of Melbourne, the centre of Melbourne, and probably one of the most beautiful cities on the planet. We are living in a time where we have a lot of opportunity, for the most part. We are so fortunate we don't have to worry about those conditions anymore. But what a shame that by replacing those hurdles, famine, poverty, disease, we've replaced them with hurdles to living a sustainable life. And those hurdles are obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, strokes, type 2 diabetes. We have created for ourselves these hurdles after all the work that humanity did to overcome some of those burdens that have befallen us for some 10,000 years. We now have new hurdles, and those hurdles are getting higher and higher every single day. There is no more debate when it comes to the science of how we can go about fixing this. If the animal products that are inducing inflammation, that are bringing with them high cholesterol, lots of sugar and saturated fat, if they are the cause of our problem, then we need to remove them from our diet. Remembering that there are myths surrounding what you've been told. Take, for example, our beautiful fish that inhabit the oceans, the second world that we live in. We are told that we need to consume fish because they are supposedly low in fat. We are told we need them for omega-3, the healthy fats. But you have to understand, where does the fish get its omega-3? It gets its omega-3 from the same place that we do, from plants. When it swims and it consumes the plants, that is the seaweed, when it consumes the plants, the flora of the ocean, it derives the omega-3 into its body. It also brings with it animal protein. It also brings with it cholesterol. And no one eats a raw fish, so you fry it, you put it in batter, and you consume saturated fat with it. The body doesn't know that we're living in 2017 now. The body, for its defensive mechanisms, thinks that it is 2,000 years ago. So it knows that we could potentially be in a famine tomorrow. So it stores every single bit of energy we give it. So anytime you're consuming saturated fat, which is a very, very powerful, rich energy source, the body thinks this is fantastic and it stores it. Just like cholesterol. Cholesterol isn't a bad thing. Cholesterol is at the center of every single hormone in your body. The liver or the pancreas, for example, adds a few things to the side to make insulin. When we adjust it even further, we can make vitamin D, etc., etc. The body believes that when we give it cholesterol, it thinks this is fantastic, I could be in a famine tomorrow, I'm going to store this cholesterol. And it stores the cholesterol in the liver, in the muscles, and in those beautiful coronary arteries. And when those coronary arteries become blocked, they lead to heart attacks, they lead to strokes, and of course, they drive high blood pressure. The vessels don't like having cholesterol in them. They set off an inflammatory process, that word again, inflammatory process, that drives a lot of the disease. So we consume these animal products, the fish, and we draw in with it not only the omega-3, but we get everything else that destroys us. Dairy is exactly the same. We have been fooled into believing that we need to consume dairy for calcium, but the cows get their calcium from the ground. When we consume dairy, we are consuming a product that is designed to take a little baby calf and grow it into a huge big cow. And the way it does that is that in that fluid are a number of growth factors, fats, oils, and especially hormones that wash over the calf's cells and tell it to grow, grow, grow. Particularly hormone-sensitive cells. These are cells that respond really aggressively to hormone stimulation. I don't want my patients or even myself, I don't want my cells that are hormone-sensitive to be told to grow, 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 grow. When my patients who have had breast cancer come into me, one of the first things I do is ensure they never touch dairy again. I do not want anything telling those breast cancer cells or the breast cells that are remaining to grow. So think about the hormone-sensitive cells of the body, the breast, the ovary, and the prostate. You don't want to have those cells being told to grow, grow, grow. And urologists, when you go and see a urologist after having prostate surgery, they will always say to you, never ever touch dairy ever again. That is the myth that we have been told for many years. Dairy is fine because it contains calcium. There is absolutely no recorded evidence of any clinical case of anyone having calcium deficiency when you've had a vegan diet. Absolutely not. Calcium in itself is absorbed by a multitude of pathways. It depends on so many other factors that to even just assign calcium so much responsibility that it's just whatever you eat will go into your body is irresponsible. And most doctors probably still don't understand exactly how calcium gets absorbed and what drives it. And when you do, you recognize that there's a lot more going on. And in fact, when the body is stressed, when the gut is actually stressed, and those gates that are in the bowel aren't able to absorb nutrients properly, that's where you want to be able to fix things first. So what is the cure to all of this? If we're talking about why animal products are so bad for us, what can we do about it? Certainly if we neglect animal products, will that help, and why? Think about every single cell in the body. Every cell in the body has a nucleus, which is like a computer, and it needs energy. The best energy that we can give it is sugar. Natural sugars, such as fructose, which comes from fruit, and of course, starch, glucose, which is carbohydrate. Our bodies are designed to break down carbohydrates slowly, absorb it into our body, and fuel our cells. When we do this, we are simply giving our body carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, I don't want to get too technical, but the way I recycle that is I breathe out the carbon dioxide and I retain the water. There's no byproducts, there's nothing harmful. And in that inflammatory process that I talked about before, goes away. There's no need to further exacerbate these problems. I've had 4 patients this year who've come to me with type 2 diabetes. 4 patients. And I've been able to get every single one of them off their insulin. 3 of them have been theoretically cured of their type 2 diabetes when I do the blood results. So apparently you can't ever cure people with type 2 diabetes. So I just have to tell them, well, you're probably not cured, but you theoretically have absolutely no evidence of diabetes. And these were people who were taking insulin and taking a multitude of tablets every single day. And the only thing that they did, instead of trying to fight that war which they were never going to win, is that they removed the kindling from that fire. They got rid of that, and they let the body actually repair itself naturally. And that's all they had to do. And in 6 to 8 months, those 4 people had their lives changed. But it wasn't just the diabetes that they got rid of. They got rid of the obesity. Their blood pressure fell down. That cascade of chronic health issues has evaporated. And it was all because we switched off the inflammatory system that was driving those diseases. They had a renewed sense of hope. And when you feel well, and let's face it, feeling good is addictive. When you feel well, you mentally are better and you interact better not only with your family and friends, but the community at large also. We are increasingly recognizing now that plant-based nutrition shouldn't be something that we should just consider as adults. We need to start when people are young, from birth, and even prior to birth. Again, we have seen many, many communities throughout the world who have raised children on a plant-based vegan diet, which has had all the calories and all the nutrition that they need, and they have thrived from birth. There's been never ever any issue with deficiency in these people who have adhered to a very, very wide-ranging but an intake of a highly, highly calorie-dense nutritional plant-based diet. It just doesn't happen. So when children, when teenagers, when adults start the process of plant-based health, they start to reverse their disease, because whether we like to admit it or not, when people are consuming these animal products at such a young age, they are getting the disease process started. And the human body can only put up with so much for so long. This is why I don't see, at least at this stage, 10-year-olds with type 2 diabetes. I don't see many 10-year-olds with obesity, but I see their parents with obesity. I see their parents with diabetes and hypertension and high cholesterol. Nothing changed except the body's ability to buffer the onslaught of these disease processes broke down. I use a bit of an example with some of my patients where I say to them, remember when you were about 8 years old and you'd fall over and you'd graze your knee, and within 2 or 3 days your knee would just completely heal up. The body never ever lost that ability to heal itself. What actually happens is that the blueprints to healing the body get a little bit muddied. The instructions get a bit torn, and what tears them is the diet that we're feeding ourselves 3 days a week. So the healing process takes a lot longer than it should have. But when you actually clean up those blueprints, when you actually clean up what is naturally in the cell, a repair process, the body returns to a natural state. Understand that obesity is not a static condition. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that obesity is actually a disease state. The body is actually recognizing that it's in a state of distress. We see elevations of inflammatory hormones when we take normal blood from patients that are obese. The body is fighting a war. Now you may feel well, but inside the body is naturally fighting a war. What is remarkable about plant-based nutrition is that when we remove that onslaught 3 times a day, when we take away what we're doing to our bodies and we instead replace it with the healing foods of whole foods plant-based nutrition, the body starts to win. Remember I said at the start, you can't win a war by just taking medications, but when you remove the kindling from that flame, you actually start to repair it. Your body does what it did when you were 8 years old and you'd graze your knee. It'll start to repair the process of obesity. Now I've had patients who have lost maybe 30, 40 kilos of weight by not exercising. All they have done is eat the right diet, and their body has ramped up their basal metabolic rate. It has recognized that their cells are full of all these toxic products, and it has very quickly started to get rid of them. And they come to me and say, but I haven't done much exercise. How did I lose this weight? And the answer is because the body is trying to return to a state of hemostasis, a state where there is absolute control and there is peace within the body. So whole foods plant-based nutrition represents for the Western world particularly the overcoming of that hurdle towards a long sustainable life. And we're not going to gain anything when it comes to technology, comes to science, if we don't recognize what we are doing to ourselves. I have a particular love of astronomy and a particular love of science, and it disappoints me that we can have 2 news stories where one is talking about the idea of landing on Mars in 2030 and the other one is talking about the fact that children these days are going to die before their parents. Something has gone incredibly wrong. We need to refocus not only on the mental wellness that brings with it the vegan movement and the plant-based movement, but then the physical wellness as well. Thank you very, very much.